I'll give you 24 hours to get out of my house before I call the police and have you arrested for fraud, I said, dropping the real documents on the dinner table in front of my shocked cousins and their guests. Their faces drained of color as I revealed the truth. While I was in a coma, you committed forgery and stole everything I owned, but my granddad was smarter than both of you, and now I have proof. I'm Catherine Carter, and 3 months earlier I hadn't seen the truck headed the wrong way, my way. 1 minute I was driving through the rain-slicked streets of Boston, heading to my grandfather's funeral, and the next, my world exploded in a symphony of breaking glass and twisting metal. My last conscious thought was a piercing regret that I wouldn't be able to say goodbye to the man who had raised me after my parents died. When I woke up 3 weeks later, everything had changed. Miss Carter? Kathy? Can you hear me? The voice seemed to float from somewhere above me, distant and echo-like. I tried to open my eyes, but they felt glued shut. Every inch of my body throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. She's responding to stimuli. Heart rate's up. I think she's coming around, another voice said. I finally managed to pry my eyelids open, wincing at the harsh fluorescent lights. A nurse in blue scrubs leaned over me, her face a mask of professional concern. Where am I? My voice came out as a rasp, barely audible. Massachusetts General Hospital. You've been in a coma for 23 days following a car accident, she explained. You're very lucky to be alive. Lucky wasn't exactly how I felt. As awareness crept back into my body, so did pain, sharp in some places, dull and throbbing in others. My left arm was encased in a cast, and I could feel bandages wrapped tightly around my ribs. My grandfather's funeral, I whispered. I missed it. The nurse gave me a sympathetic look. I'm afraid so. Is there someone we can call for you? My cousin Nathan. He's my emergency contact. I closed my eyes, feeling tears leak out from beneath my lids. I had missed saying goodbye to Grandpa William. He was the one who'd taken me in at 9 years old when my parents' plane crashed. He'd taught me everything, from how to fish to how to stand up for myself. Hours later, I heard familiar voices in the hallway, Nathan and his wife Rebecca speaking with my doctor. I struggled to stay awake to call out to them, but the medication pulled me back under. The next morning, Nathan and Rebecca stood awkwardly by my bed. Nathan shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Kathy, thank God you're awake. Nathan stepped forward, taking my hand carefully between his. We've been so worried. I tried to smile, but it felt wrong on my face. Sorry to scare everyone. How was the funeral? I asked, the words catching in my throat. Nathan and Rebecca exchanged a quick glance that sent a chill through my body. It was appropriate, Nathan said finally. Grandfather wouldn't have wanted anything extravagant. That didn't sound right. Grandpa William had always said he wanted a celebration when he died, not a somber affair. He'd even set aside money specifically for a jazz band. What about his will? I asked. Has it been read yet? Another glance between them. My cousin shifted uncomfortably. Yes, actually, the lawyer read it 2 weeks ago, Nathan said. Grandfather left the house to me and Beck along with most of his assets. I felt like I'd been hit by that truck all over again. What? That can't be right. Kathy, Rebecca said soothingly, William changed his will last year. He left you $25,000, which we've already put toward your medical expenses. He thought it was best if we handled the estate, given your history. My history? I'd worked alongside Grandpa in his real estate business for 10 years. Meanwhile, Nathan had only returned to Massachusetts when his acting career fizzled out 3 years ago. I don't understand, I whispered, my head pounding. He wouldn't do that. We've cleared out your apartment since the lease was up, Nathan added. Your things are in storage, and when you're released, you can stay in the guest room until you get back on your feet. They had cleared out my apartment? My lease wasn't up for another 4 months. I'd like to see the will, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Rebecca's smile tightened. Of course, once you're feeling better. The doctor says you need rest, not stress. As they left, I caught the satisfied look that passed between them. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Something wasn't right about Grandpa's will, and my cousins knew it. I hit the call button for the nurse, fighting against the fatigue. When she appeared, I asked for my personal effects. Inside my damaged purse were my shattered phone, keys, and wallet. The phone wouldn't turn on, but as I fingered my keychain, I felt the small USB drive that Grandpa had given me 3 months ago. Keep this safe, he'd said with a wink. "You never know when you might need it." I clutched the keychain tightly in my palm. Whatever game Nathan and Rebecca were playing, they had no idea who they were up against. 2 weeks later, Rebecca drove me to what was now apparently their house, my childhood home in Brookline. The grand Victorian that Grandpa William had lovingly restored now felt like enemy territory. "We've prepared the garden room for you," Rebecca said as she helped me up the front steps. I leaned heavily on my cane, hating the weakness in my body. The garden room, the smallest bedroom in the house where we usually put overnight guests we weren't particularly fond of. Message received. "My laptop? My files from work?" I asked. "In boxes in the basement, I think. You really shouldn't worry about work yet, Kathy." Nathan appeared, wearing one of Grandpa's cardigans, and something inside me snapped at the sight. I managed to keep my face neutral, though my hand tightened on the cane. "I've taken over Grandpa's position at Carter Development," Nathan announced. "Someone had to step in." I literally felt my blood pressure spike. "You've taken over the company? You don't know the first thing about real estate development?" "I've been learning, and I have Jensen as Chief Operations Officer to help with the technical aspects." Jensen Harris, my grandfather's right-hand man for 30 years. I'd always thought he'd be in my corner. That night I lay awake long after the house had gone quiet. I was trapped, injured, isolated, and apparently robbed of my inheritance. But I still had the USB drive from Grandpa, and a growing determination to discover what was really going on. The next day I texted my friend Zoe, who worked at the law firm that had handled my grandfather's affairs. "Me. Out of hospital. Need to talk. Private matter. Can you come by tomorrow?" Zoe. "Oh my God. So glad you're recovering. Absolutely. Lunch hour? I can bring soup." Me. "Perfect. Use the garden entrance. Don't tell anyone you're coming." When she arrived, Zoe's eyes widened at my condition, though she tried to hide her shock. "What's going on?" she asked once we were settled with our soup. "And why all the secrecy?" I explained everything. As I talked, Zoe's expression shifted from concern to outright alarm. "That doesn't sound like the will I remember," she said. "I wasn't involved directly. Mr. Harrington handled William's legal affairs, but I definitely recall discussions about you taking over the company." My heart raced. So Grandpa didn't change his will last year? Zoe reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I made copies of some documents. It's a breach of protocol, but when your text seemed so urgent." Inside was a copy of what appeared to be my grandfather's will, dated 18 months prior. I scanned the contents, my soup forgotten. "This leaves everything to me," I said, "except a $50,000 bequest to Nathan." Zoe nodded grimly. "That's the last version I saw. If there's a newer one, it wasn't prepared by our firm." I needed more allies. The nurse, Paula, turned out to be invaluable. Not only did she bring me stronger pain medication, but she also revealed that Jensen Harris had been suddenly let go from the company after the funeral. She promised to try to get his contact information from her sister, who cleaned the Carter Development offices. "Don't you worry," Paula winked. "My sister and I know how to keep things quiet." Around 2 a.m. one night, I carefully made my way through the dark house to Grandpa's study. Each step sent shards of pain through my ribs, but I pressed on. Already Nathan and Rebecca had begun to make changes. Grandpa's collection of vintage maps had been replaced by generic modern art prints. His beloved leather chair was gone. The desktop computer in the corner still worked, and after trying several passwords, I unlocked it with the address of Grandpa's childhood home. I quickly inserted the USB drive. The drive contained a folder labeled EC Safeguard with 3 files, a video, a PDF document, and a text file simply named Read This First. I opened the text file. It said, "Kathy, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me, and you obviously have reason to believe my wishes aren't being honored. The video contains my verbal testimony regarding my true wishes. The PDF is a copy of my actual will, as prepared by Harrington in January last year. I've suspected for some time that Nathan and Rebecca have been looking for ways to manipulate my estate. The original will is in my safety deposit box at First National on Boylston Street, box hash 247. The key is taped inside my copy of The Art of War on the 3rd shelf in this study. I love you, kiddo. You've made me proud every day. Grandpa William." Tears streamed down my face as I read his words. Grandpa had known. He'd seen through Nathan and Rebecca's schemes and had prepared for it. I clicked on the video file. Grandpa's face filled the screen, his blue eyes, so like mine, clear, and determined. The video was dated just 3 months before his death. I, William Edward Carter, being of sound mind and body, declare this to be my verbal testimony regarding my last will and testament, he began. Despite any documents that may appear after my death, my true and final wishes are as recorded in the will prepared by Franklin Harrington dated January 15th last year. He detailed the contents of the will, explicitly stating that I was to inherit his estate and business holdings, with only a modest sum going to Nathan. If any other will appears after my death, Grandpa continued, his voice hardening, it should be considered suspect. Nathan and Rebecca have recently suggested that I update my will due to what they call Kathy's inexperience. This is a transparent attempt to divert my assets. The video ended with Grandpa giving the date again and stating clearly that he was making this recording of his own free will, without coercion. I heard a creak in the hallway and quickly removed the drive, hiding behind the curtains just as Rebecca entered. She checked the computer, took something from the desk drawer, and left. I waited 5 agonizing minutes before emerging, my injured body protesting the cramped position. I needed to get back to my room before anyone else decided to make a midnight inspection. The next morning, Rebecca brought me the supposed updated will, as promised. It was expertly done. The language mimicked Grandpa's usual style with a plausible explanation for the change, concerns about my emotional instability following a breakup last year. The breakup was real. My ex had turned out to be more interested in my family connections than in me, but it had been a clean split. I'd never been emotionally unstable in my life. The signature looked convincingly like Grandpa's, and the witnesses were Rebecca's brother Michael and a name I didn't recognize, Amanda Fowler. "Who's Amanda Fowler?" I asked, keeping my tone merely curious. "A notary Michael knows," Rebecca replied smoothly. "We wanted everything to be official." I nodded, playing along. "Maybe it's for the best. Recovery is my priority now anyway." Rebecca seemed relieved by my apparent acceptance. When she left, I immediately texted Zoe. They showed me the fake will. Witnesses, Michael Parker, Rebecca's brother, and Amanda Fowler, notary. "Can you check if this Amanda person is even real?" Later that day, I received her response. Zoe, Amanda Fowler exists but had her notary license suspended 3 months ago for irregularities. This gets worse. Your new will isn't registered with the probate court. Only the original one is. They must not have known they needed to file it officially. I smiled for the first time since waking up in the hospital. Nathan and Rebecca might have thought they were clever, but they'd made a critical mistake. Now I just needed to get that key and access the safety deposit box. The next day, after Paula left for her lunch break, I made my way to the study. Every step still hurt, but anger and determination provided excellent motivation. I went straight to the bookshelves, eyes scanning for The Art of War. There it was, sandwiched between Good to Great and The 48 Laws of Power. I carefully pulled it out and opened it. Nothing. Heart racing, I flipped through every page. No key. Had they found it, or had Grandpa moved it? As I turned to leave, I caught sight of a small decorative box on one of the bookshelves, an intricate wooden puzzle box Grandpa had brought back from Japan. Acting on instinct, I took it down and began the sequence he'd once shown me. Slide right panel, press bottom corner, slide top panel left, press center twice. The final panel popped open, revealing a small key taped to the inside with a note in Grandpa's handwriting. Backup, box hash 247. I nearly cried out in relief. Even when hiding his backup plan, Grandpa had a backup for his backup. I quickly pocketed the key and returned the box to its place. Now I just needed to get to that bank. Getting to First National Bank wouldn't be easy in my condition. I couldn't drive yet, and asking Nathan or Rebecca for a ride was obviously out of the question. I needed another ally. Thankfully, Paula had obtained Jensen Harris's phone number from her sister. I called him as soon as I was alone. "Jensen Harris speaking. Jensen, it's Kathy Carter." "Kathy, my God, are you all right? I've been trying to reach you since the accident, but Nathan said you weren't taking calls." "I'm recovering," I said, my voice tight with emotion. "Listen, Jensen, I need your help. Something's very wrong with Grandpa's will." I explained everything as concisely as possible. Jensen listened without interrupting. "I knew something wasn't right," he said when I finished. "William would never have left you with nothing. And the way Nathan swooped in, making decisions he had no business making, it stank to high heaven." "I have proof," I told him, clutching the phone like a lifeline. but I need to get to First National to retrieve the original will from his safety deposit box. I'll take you, Jensen said immediately. Just tell me when you want to go. We arranged for him to pick me up the next day when Paula would be at lunch. For the first time since the accident, I felt hope stirring in my chest. The pieces were finally coming together, and soon I would have everything I needed to expose Nathan and Rebecca's treachery. That night I barely slept. My mind raced with possibilities and plans. What if they'd somehow gotten to the original will? What if the key didn't work? What if Nathan or Rebecca caught me leaving with Jensen? But underneath the anxiety was a steely determination that pushed me forward. Grandpa had trusted me with his legacy, and I wouldn't let him down. The next day felt endless. Paula noticed my restlessness, but attributed it to cabin fever. Finally, at 11, she left for lunch, and I struggled into the most professional outfit I could find among the clothes Rebecca had kept for me. Jensen was waiting outside in his blue Volvo. "Geez, Kathy, you look like you went 10 rounds with a heavyweight," he said as I eased into the passenger seat. "Feels like it too," I admitted, breathing through the pain. "But I'm done being the victim." The drive to First National took 20 minutes. Each bump in the road sent pain shooting through my still-healing ribs, but I barely noticed. My mind was fixed on what awaited us at the bank. The clerk led us to a private room, and we waited for a short while for the safety deposit box to be retrieved and brought to us. My hands trembled as I inserted the key. Inside was a sealed envelope marked "Last Will and Testament, William Edward Carter," and a smaller envelope with my name on it. I opened the will first, confirming it matched the copy from the USB drive. Then I opened the personal envelope, finding a handwritten letter that brought fresh tears to my eyes. "My dearest Kathy, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've discovered the truth. I'm sorry I didn't tell you about my suspicions directly, but I hoped I was wrong about Nathan and Rebecca. Trust Jensen and Harrington. They're good men who've served our family well. Remember what I always told you? The best revenge is massive success. Take back what's yours, but don't let bitterness consume you. You're better than that. I couldn't have loved you more if you'd been my own daughter. Make me proud, kiddo. All my love, Grandpa." I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling his presence so strongly it took my breath away. "Let's make copies of everything," Jensen said gently, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Then we'll take the originals to Harrington." As we left the bank, I felt lighter than I had in weeks, despite the physical pain. The truth was in my hands now. No more uncertainty, no more powerlessness. It was time to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Franklin Harrington was outraged when we showed him the evidence. "Forgery of a will is a felony," he explained, his bushy eyebrows drawn together in anger, "and they've made multiple critical errors." Over the next week, we built our case methodically. Zoe uncovered records showing Rebecca's brother Michael was out of the country on the date he supposedly witnessed the forged will, a damning inconsistency that would be impossible to explain away. Amanda Fowler, when approached by Harrington's investigator, crumbled immediately, admitting she'd been paid $5,000 to backdate her notary stamp. "They promised me it was just paperwork that needed to be fixed," she told the investigator tearfully. "I had no idea it was a forged will." Meanwhile, I contacted Maria Delgado, Grandpa's former home health aide, who was happy to confirm she'd witnessed the real will. "Mr. William, he worried about those two," she told me over coffee in a small cafe far from the house, always asking about his money, where papers were kept, not good people. Jensen and I also discovered something even more alarming. Nathan had already begun selling off company assets at below-market rates to a developer friend, pocketing kickbacks on the side. It was clear he was trying to strip as much value from Carter Development as possible before anyone could stop him. "He's like a kid in a candy store," Jensen said grimly as we reviewed the transaction records. "No sense of long-term strategy, just grabbing whatever he can." Harrington filed an emergency petition with the probate court. "We'll have a hearing next week," he informed me as we sat in his wood-paneled office. "Be prepared for them to fight dirty. They've already hired Samuels from downtown." "The Shark?" I asked, recognizing the name of a notoriously aggressive attorney. Harrington nodded. "They'll try to paint you as unstable, possibly even claim the accident and coma affected your reasoning. We need to be ready for that." "I'm not afraid," I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. After everything I'd been through, the accident, the coma, the betrayal, facing my cousins in court seemed almost easy by comparison. Let them try. I decided not to wait for the court date. Armed with copies of all the evidence, I returned to the house while Nathan and Rebecca were hosting a dinner party for potential investors, people who deserved to know exactly who they were dealing with. I waited in Grandpa's study until I heard the dining room fill with voices and laughter. Then, using my cane for support, I made my entrance. The room fell silent as I appeared in the doorway. 8 people sat around my grandfather's antique mahogany table, crystal glasses glinting in the chandelier light. "Kathy!" Nathan's voice was sharp with alarm. "You should be resting." "I've rested enough," I said, my voice stronger and louder than I'd expected. "I think it's time we had a family discussion, in front of witnesses." Rebecca stood quickly. "Our guests don't need to be bothered with—" "With what?" I interrupted. "With the fact that you forged my grandfather's will? That you've been systematically looting his company? That you're currently being investigated for felony fraud?" One of the guests, a silver-haired man I recognized as a longtime investor, set down his wine glass. "Nathan, what is she talking about?" I stepped forward, placing a folder on the table. My voice strong and bold, I said, "I have here the real will, witnessed by Jensen Harris and Maria Delgado, leaving everything to me except for $50,000 to Nathan. I also have Grandpa's video testimony stating his intentions, a confession from your notary about backdating documents, and a report showing how company assets are being sold at suspicious discounts." The color drained from Nathan's face. "These are serious allegations." "They're not allegations," I cut in, feeling a surge of righteous anger. "They're facts. Facts that will be presented in probate court next week. Facts that will likely lead to criminal charges." Rebecca's voice took on a desperate edge. "You were always his favorite. It wasn't fair." "Fair?" I felt my voice rising, getting louder, despite my efforts to stay calm. "Was it fair to steal my inheritance while I was in a coma? Was it fair to fire loyal employees who knew the truth? Was it fair to destroy family heirlooms and redecorate this house before Grandpa was even cold in his grave?" The room had gone deathly quiet. The investors exchanged uncomfortable glances as Nathan and Rebecca stared at me, then at each other, then at their rapidly departing dinner guests. "You have until tomorrow to pack your things," I said, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "After that, I'm changing the locks. Any personal items left behind will be placed in storage, just like you did with mine." As I turned to leave, Nathan called out, "You can't prove any of this." I looked back at him, meeting his gaze squarely. "Grandpa always said you were a terrible poker player, Nathan. You should see your face right now. It says everything the court needs to know." The hearing was almost anticlimactic after the confrontation at the house. Nathan and Rebecca didn't even show up. Their lawyer requested a continuance, which the judge denied after reviewing our emergency petition. I sat beside Harrington as he methodically presented our evidence: the original will from the safety deposit box, Grandpa's video testimony, the handwriting expert who confirmed the forged signature, Maria Delgado's affidavit, and Amanda Fowler's signed confession regarding the notary fraud. "The court finds the will dated January 15th to be the valid last testament of William Edward Carter," the judge announced after deliberating for less than 30 minutes. "The subsequent document is determined to be fraudulent." He ordered a full criminal investigation into the forgery and financial improprieties at Carter Development and granted me immediate access to all company records and accounts. "You did it," Harrington said, squeezing my shoulder as we left the courtroom. "William would be proud." I nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions: vindication, relief, sadness that it had come to this, and determination to restore what Nathan had damaged. When I returned to the house that evening, well, actually it was now my house, both legally and rightfully, I found Nathan and Rebecca gone, along with most of their personal belongings. They'd left in a hurry, evidently realizing the game was up. The only trace of them was a hastily scrawled note on the kitchen counter. "This isn't over." But it was over. At least the first battle was. I knew they would face criminal charges, and I was prepared for a long legal fight to recover whatever assets they had managed to siphon away. But standing in the foyer of my childhood home, I felt an overwhelming sense of rightness. I was where I belonged. 6 months later, I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the William E. Carter Memorial Park, the first phase of the West Side redevelopment project that Grandpa had been so passionate about. It featured affordable housing with green spaces and community facilities exactly as he had envisioned. I'd made certain to hire a jazz band so Granddad finally got the fun, noise, joy, and laughter he'd wanted. My ribs had healed, and I'd finally gotten the cast off my arm. The physical scars were fading, though sometimes I still woke from nightmares about the accident and the betrayal that followed. Nathan and Rebecca had fled to Florida after being charged with multiple felonies. Last I heard, they were negotiating a plea deal that would keep them out of prison but require full restitution. I didn't care much about seeing them behind bars. What mattered to me was rebuilding what they had tried to destroy. The company had suffered under Nathan's brief tenure, but not irreparably. With Jensen back as chief operations officer, and my own experience from working alongside Grandpa for a decade, we were already turning things around. The employees who had been let go were rehired, and morale was improving daily. "He would be so proud," Jensen said beside me as we watched the mayor cut the ribbon. I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. "The best revenge is massive success," I quoted. William always did have a way with words. The plaque on the park's entrance read, "Dedicated to William Edward Carter, who taught us that family isn't just about blood, it's about love, trust, and standing by each other when it matters most." As I traced the words with my fingers, I finally felt at peace. Grandpa's legacy wasn't just about buildings and bank accounts. It was about doing the right thing, even when it's hard. It was about planning for the future while remembering where you came from. It was about the values he'd instilled in me since I was that frightened 9-year-old girl who'd lost her parents. And as I looked around at what we were building, not just the physical structures, but the community connections, the trust being restored with investors and partners, the spirit of the company rising from the ashes of Nathan's greed, I knew that the real inheritance Grandpa had left me wasn't the money or the company. It was knowing my own strength. It was the determination to fight for what's right. It was his wisdom, guiding me even now. And that was something no one could ever take from me again. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed this story of justice and restoration, don't forget to like and subscribe. Drop a comment below if you've ever had to stand up for your rights or want to make a comment about this story. We'd love to hear from you, and remember to hit that notification bell to keep updated.